Hey everyone, my name is Kosachev Alexander. I'm super excited to be here today on this channel. I was invited to showcase my recent project made based on an awesome concept art by Andrew Modestov. Please check out his page on Artstation. This project is kinda special for me because the high poly model was made completely in Zbrush, including the blockout stage. So this video is going to be especially interesting for those who think that Zbrush is not really suitable for hard surface modeling. As you can see, there are quite a bit of hard surface involved. I want to note that shield and sword will not be covered today because they were made as a separate project. So I want to redo helmet from scratch to show you some tips and tricks that I've developed throughout the process. This approach worked for the chest plate as well, so hopefully you would be able to adopt it and use in your projects. So let's get started. So this is my final high-res model for the base body. And before we start, I want to tell you a little bit about my references on this project. Here I didn't use a lot of them, except for the cat face features, like the nose and the mouth. But concerning the hard surface elements, I was completely relying on the feeling I had from the main concept. So, as this was a pretty stylized character, the main struggle was to grasp the proportions, because when we speak about stylization, it's always about exaggeration and misproportion. I'm not really sure if I succeeded in that, but the goal was not to be 100% accurate to the original concept, but rather to make this cat animation ready, game ready asset. So there were some places where I inevitably had to compromise. So, to the helmet. As you can see, I'm going to use default UI, except for this custom shelf. If you didn't know, you can go to the preferences, to config, enable customize, and then you can, by pressing Ctrl Alt and left click, you can drag and drop here any button. Very useful if you use a lot of some features. Also, I'm going to turn off perspective and turn on the rotate on y-axis only. Really helpful to avoid some weird angles when you rotate your model. Also, before we start, I want to tell you some, rules that I've developed over working on those hard elements. First one is that you want to work without thickness as long as possible. Just try to avoid extrusion to a certain till the certain point, until you start adding divisions, adding poly count to your model. And the second rule is try to stay at the lowest possible poly count level until you are satisfied with overall shape of your model and overall topology. So you just think ahead of all those dots, of the shape of edges that have to be sharp before you start increasing your poly count. So let's start with a simple sphere. As you can see, there it is visible. There is this base part of this helmet that protects the head, and obviously it has two holes in it, one for the neck and one for the face. So let's get started with them. It's as easy as taking a mask you need, like for the neck, the rectangular mask, and for the facial hole I will take circular. No, sorry, not circular, but mask circle, this one. Then I'm pressing space button. I can move the shape I liked. You don't really have to concentrate a lot on the shapes and proportions now. You just need to get those two holes. As you know, if we turn on the polyframe colors, by pressing Ctrl W, you can make the masked areas a different polygroup. Now by pressing Ctrl and Shift on the polygroup we want to leave, we hide the other polygroup. Let's delete hidden. If you don't know, I will show it for the first time. You can go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. So if you click it, as you can see in the subtool menu, now this model is only what we can see now. So after that we got these weird crisp edges. Also for the sake of the look, I'm going to show backface. It's in display properties, double. Oh, and that's why it's super important to do that, because I forgot to unmask the back part. So let's reverse a little bit to this part, make it double, and just unselect this part. Okay, let's do it once again. Delete hidden. Now the shape is good. So to these crisp edges, there is a very nice feature that I really like to use when I'm blocking out a model in Zbrush. In Deformation tab there is Polish by features, by groups, crisp edges. They all have different settings, but what we want to use now is either Polish by features or Polish by groups. They, in this case, work similarly. If we just drag it, you can see the topology evens out and all these crisp edges evens out. And as you can see, the overall shape didn't change a bit. So the overall size of the helmet is just the same. If I do the features or the groups, the result is similar. If I do polish, the result is a little bit different. As you can see, I lost a little bit of the model here, down here, and the crisp edges still look weird. This is not a circle that I'm looking for. So in this case, you just use polish by groups, say polish by groups. Now what you want to do is to remesh your geometry. You go to Geometry tab and Z-remesher. Let's simply Z-remesh it. Keep your standard settings. So as you can see, what we've got so far, we have two holes. We've got the right form of this helmet base part. We've got poly loops going over the holes. As you can see here, there are poly loops where they need to be. That's what we want. But at this stage the topology is a little bit too dense, so I want simply decrease it by zero meshing with half turned on. I press it several times till I'm comfortable with the poly count. That looks just fine. You can always change it, so for the starter it's very good topology and poly count. What I also wanted to add here is that you want to use the software features as much as possible. I believe this is a general rule for hard surface modeling. You want to, at the starter stages, you want to avoid doing anything with like your move tool or anything like that that involves your hand painting and your working with your hands. So try to do as much as possible when you are shaping out your model with the features that there is in the program, like zero measure, this deformation tab, and so on and so forth. So even if this hole is too small, it doesn't really matter. Now let's go to the visor parts, probably the hardest parts. So now to the visors. I decided to start with the simple cube. I want to keep only two sides of this cube, so with the help of Zmodeler, you can choose it here or by pressing BZM. I want to mask only those two sides. It's done pretty easily. Mask, flat and polygroup. 1, 2, and making it a different polygroup, I can delete everything else. Then I want to rotate it 45 degrees. With Shift pushed, it rotates with even angle. At the same time, I want the pivot, the gizmo, be facing the front side. So while holding Alt, I'm rotating the pivot point, not the model. But I want it to be back 45 degrees, so Alt Shift and 45. Yeah, something like that. So I chose the cube to be the base model because I really want this sharp edge. As you can see, there is sharp edge on the concept. Not to be painted by me, by some pinch brush or something else, but to be from the very beginning, from the topology. So let's just make it, give it the shape of a sphere. You can go to the transform menu and choose bend arc, very useful tool. You can play with all these handles, it gives out very different awesome looking shapes like this. But now we need that one. It is going to wrap the helmet, right? Okay, maybe too much. Maybe I want it to be a little bit smaller. Like this. I will accept it and move it. Just place it where I think it's right. I will, for the sake of visuals, also turn on back faces to see it completely. Maybe make it a little bit smaller. Also, I would like to rotate it for a little bit, maybe something like that. So I'll explain what I want to do next. I want those 3 poly loops to be the upper visor and maybe those 2 to be the lower one. So I can easily do it by deleting other, by masking and deleting other poly loops. But before I do that, I also want to spherize it. I want to add curve to this part. It's also done quite easily. I want to push the pivot point a little bit back, go to Deformation tab, and spherize it. See how it gets the right shape. So I don't want to overdo it, so let's keep it like this. So now deleting those extra poly loops. Once again, Zmodeler would help me. I want to mask a poly loop. That one, that one, and that one. Making it a separate poly loop. Delete hidden. As you can see, almost what we want. Maybe just a little bit of tweaking. As you remember, this hole, facial hole, we can increase at any point, so we just don't compare it with the concept. Next, we want to separate those 2 parts so that we can work with them separately. It's done by auto group them. You can find this button under polygroups menu, auto groups, and splitting it up in subtool menu, split by groups. Okay. So let's start with the upper visor. First, let's see what features we want to add at this point. Basically, there are only 2 left. This little line between the metal part and the golden part, and those dots. Dots are really tricky because if we start making them at this poly count level, after we start dividing it, it would inevitably lose its shape and start becoming oval. That's what we don't want, so unfortunately we would have to make them at the very end by booleaning it. It would end up with not a very nice topology, but it's going to be one of the last steps. So as this is a high poly model, this is not a big problem. But let's start with this line. So I decided to make this golden part be extended just a little bit, because my low poly model would be flat, and this extension would simply give a little bit like height breakup effect on normal map, so it's just fine, even though the concept shows that there is no any extrusion here. So let's start with the Zmodeler once again. We want to insert single edge loop in here. Something maybe like that. We also want to add thickness at this point, because unfortunately Zbrush Boolean system cannot Boolean simple planes. It has to be a watertight object. So let's extrude. Polygroup all. Okay. Maybe something like that. Yep. And I also want to extrude this poly loop, so I want to make it a different polygroup first. I choose poly loop and flat, mask, poly loop and flat. Like that, like that, like that, like that. So, and now I can extrude it. Polygroup all. Too much. I need to zoom in a little bit. Maybe something like that. Yeah. So as you can see, even though the concept looks like it's one flat surface, you can, well, play with it a little bit and still get the right visual effect. Now we want to add divisions because we want to boolean those dots. Let's go to the divisions, but as we want to keep some edges sharp, we want to crease them. In Zmodeler we can choose crease, edge loop partial. Like this. On this stage you want to work with symmetry on, because edge loop complete. Let's crease it edge with this setting. Like that. I want probably everything to be creased. I can create this one, maybe this. To be more precise, I would rather crease it with edge loop partial, as it creases out more than I want. This to be creased out, this, that, and that one. As my symmetry was toggled on, the other side is also creased, so I will check if the result is what I want. I go to the geometry tab and start dividing it. Yeah, it looks right. Here is where I forgot to do this. So, yep. Now you see the difference here where I creased the edge is too sharp, and here where I didn't crease it, it's much more smoother. So at some places I want to uncrease it, but I will do it at a certain point. So I would go back a little bit. This, crease that. Maybe I will divide it twice, then uncrease all. You can do it here, crease, uncrease all, and divide once again with no creases. So it doesn't ruin the shape, and I don't need really to this edge to be knife sharp, so it should be something like that. So that's exactly what I want. Maybe once again. So at this point, as you can see, we get the right shape. So behind the scenes I finished the lower visor, and from this perspective it looks a little bit extended compared to the concept, so maybe I can push it back just a bit, maybe like that. Yeah, maybe even change the angle a little bit. What's that? That's weird. Okay, the angle. Maybe we can change this curve. As you can see, there's that curve with Move tool. It's already pretty high res, so we can go to the Move tool and make sure that focal shift is big enough. I mean, the number is big enough. And the size is also big enough. So maybe something like that, yeah. So this part can probably extend a little bit more. No, not like that. As you can see, it has some sort of peak that I want to highlight. So it's a matter of taste, and this stage can take you a very long time. I don't see as a goal to get the right shape. I'm just showing you some of techniques that I found useful. So let's just move on. So now I want to make those dots, these and these. I will make it with the help of Boolean. So what I want you to remember at this point, that after we Boolean to get rid of sharp edges, we would have to divide some more. So you don't want your model that you're going to Boolean to be at the highest rest, just one step lower, maybe 2 steps lower, so that both those edges of the base model and the edges that are going to appear after Booleaning would get softer at the same time. So, as I mentioned before, those tricky dots have a very certain shape. We cannot simply, for example, I want to append, let's say, a cylinder. We cannot simply extend it like that, because this is an oval, not what we are looking for. So what we can do is actually delete half of it. Why don't you work? Delete hidden. We can move this part here, maybe even a little bit more. Mirror and weld. And now go to Zmodeler and bridge 2 holes like this and like this, and you want it to be 1 polygroup. So this is the shape I'm looking for. That's nice. So now you want to rotate it 90 degrees. Maybe we will center the pivot. You want to rotate it once again. And there is that nice Zbrush feature you might not be aware of. If you, while your gizmo is on, if you press Ctrl and start to drag, you would copy it. But if you release Ctrl at that time and keep moving, you would start to create new copies at the same distance. So you can make many instances of one mesh. They are going to be one polygroup, and all except for the last one are going to be masked, so you don't have so you need to remember to unmask it. So that's something that we got. Maybe we can extend it for the boolean and get to the wizard to see if the proportion and all that is right. So we simply by hand weird lag. I couldn't rotate it. Maybe something like that. Yep. Do I like it? Maybe. Yep, something like that. Maybe a little bit here. I also want it to be like 90 degrees to the surface. Yeah, maybe like this. So once again, I don't want to get deep into the detail concerning the relation to the concept. So I am going to be fine with that. So now I simply boolean it. I want this upper wizard to be somewhere here. I turn on live boolean and choose difference. I also want to hide all other subtools. So let's do this. Let's go to the boolean, make boolean mesh. Boolean mesh gets you get it as a separate tool, so you don't lose your previous subtools. That's very useful. As you can see, we've got some weird topology here, and there's really little we can do about this. I can try to fix it now, but sometimes, considering that this is already a high poly model, that could be something you have to deal with. But let's try to remesh it. First, before we remesh it, I want to make it to mirror and weld it. Okay. So what if I now zero mesh it, but I want to keep groups. Let's see what would be the result. We lost geometry here, that's what I don't like, but here is the result is overall nice. I like it overall. So let's see what we can do not to lose this information. So let's try to simply divide it. No, not what we want. What if we crease it? And yeah, that helped. So keep creases and keep groups would solve the problem. That's nice to know. Yeah. Now you want to, as you can see, the topology once again became quite small, 7,000, and it was like 60,000, I believe. I need to divide it several times. So I want to check that everything is right. For just to be on the safe side, I want to mirror and weld it. You can see the model is a little bit broken now, so it's also easily fixed by moving it a little bit, but in this direction. Maybe something like that. Yeah, and if we divide it, you can see it becomes too smooth, so I want to try to crease it once again. I turn on the Zmodeler, crease, edge loop complete. No, not what I want. This guy, no. edge loop partial, yeah, something like that, and maybe one by one I can finish the edge loop as I want. Well, edge loop partial would also work here, I believe. Yeah, looks nice. And behind, here it's even smoother. Yeah. So let's now try to divide it. I like the look of it. It's a little bit wider, so I would, for some reason, these creases didn't work. I don't understand why. Oh, I see, the symmetry was off. So I would have to make it with my hands and make symmetry once again. So if I do it with creases, maybe several times, twice, I don't know, and after that I want to uncrease all and divide it so that the edge is sharp enough but not too much. Yeah, I like the look of it. As you can see, everything on this visor was made basically procedurally with only features available in Zbrush. I haven't touched Move brush once. I haven't touched standard brush or damn standard. Nothing. That's very important when you're working with hard surface elements. So now I believe we can copy it and paste back to the original tool. I like to, first off, we turn off the live boolean, we make it invisible, make everything visible again. I don't like to delete it completely, so to be on the safe side, I'm going to copy it and paste somewhere here. I can always delete it in the end. So, and now I can delete it. Here is the upper visor. So once again, I've made some progress behind the camera, if I can say so, because well, I've finished booling the lower visor, added those side round parts and this part which I actually made up because it's not visible on the concept. Also made well, increase the poly count of the base model, made it out of camera because they are all actually really pretty. So let me just quickly tell you what I did. This is a simple conus. By masking, I extended the flat part a little bit, put it where I want it to be, mirrored and welded, and with creases divided it several times, then divided it without creases, added simple spheres. So and this is a simple cylinder. By masking certain poly loops, I made different polygroups, and then simply extruded inside. With the helmet, also the only thing that I made except for dividing was extruding one little poly loop over the neck. It's also not visible here on the concept, but as you can see, there is that extension here in the pit arm. So I would assume that the helmet would have similar geometry, and it actually looks just nicer than without it. So the only two parts of the helmet which are left are the ears and the tail. So let's start with the ears, because they are actually was very fun to make, not obvious from the first look. So if we think about this shape, what can we tell? This is a shape that consists of four faces, right? Two on the front side, two on the back side. If we take, for example, a cube, you can see that in every vertex there is only three sides connecting, so it doesn't serve, well, it's not the right shape for us. Let's delete it. So in Zbrush, in many cases when you have to come up with a weird shape that is not presented here in basic primitives, you go to initialize. If you didn't know, in this star subtool, there is a tab which is called initialize, and you can make Q-cube, Q-sphere, Q-grid. For example, Q-cube is a cube that has a nice 2x2 topology on every side. Sometimes it's very useful to start your modeling from Q-cube, but in our case we need Q-sphere. Let's try with resolution 2, I'm not sure. Maybe a little bit more. Let's put it 4 by 4 by 4. I'm not sure if it's gonna work right. Now 2 by 2 by 2 was better. Q-sphere. See what we got here. Just we can extend it a little bit, maybe a little bit more. You see, here are these four sides that we need, and the peak is also here, so it's almost exactly what we need. And if you start with Q-sphere or Q-cube, you can do almost anything. So let's finish it. I would delete this part. I would crease these and try to divide. You see? That's exactly the shape I'm looking for. I'm not really worried about the bottom, because it is going to be inside the helmet and the hat is going to cover it. If you're not comfortable with that, you can simply close the hole and crease the edges that encircles the bottom. So let's say we are comfortable with the result. Let's put it at his place. So not always obvious how this should look, how it should be started. So maybe a little bit, well, simply bigger. Well, what about something like this? Once again, I don't want to try to make this helmet look exactly the same as it is on the concept. Let's say I'm quite comfortable with that. I simply mirror and weld it. Oh yeah, once. You see, now I couldn't mirror and weld it because it has multiple subdivision levels. Freezing subdivision levels often breaks it. Let's try it. So now it didn't break anything, it's good. But at the same time, they are different in size. So that's what I was talking about. So in this case, what I like to do, I would go to the lowest level, delete higher, mirror and weld, and only after that I would divide it once again. So now I want it to be a little bit bigger, something like that. I would turn on symmetry and put it inside. Maybe something like this. So I'm trying to make this line and this line parallel. Maybe something like that, and a little bit more extended. Okay. So once again, as you remember, these are greased now, so the last divide should be without greases, maybe. So for a high poly, the 1600 is not really a number, so I would divide it once again, then uncrease, and divide without creases. You see? Now we get the organic look. That's exactly what we would want to see. Well, and to finish the ears we need just 2 more spheres. Let's append it. Let's let it be sphere 3D. So there is no magic at all, simply spheres. You can, well, I'd recommend you before exporting this model, I would merge those spheres with the disk and these spheres with the ears. That would be much better in the future for you. maybe a little bit more submerged. Maybe something like that, and simply mirror and weld. Oh, yeah, those are two separate spheres, so why wouldn't you mirror? Interesting. Oh, maybe it's because the ears not, so it's there but it's more submerged. Interesting. So I would mirror and weld this one. Let's go back to the geometry. Once again, go to the first level of subdivision. Delete higher. Mirror and weld. You see, there was some problem with the positioning of the ear, but that's not a problem. So, but unfortunately we lost the creases. So we need to go to Zmodeler. Divide it several times. Uncrease all. Divide it several times again. Like it. Extension is also, well, fine. I would submerge it a little bit more and mirror and weld. So let's assume that's good enough. So the helmet is almost done. The last part is the tail, and this is the most stylized piece of the helmet. And I've got an interesting way to do this. So let's now go to the tail. Well, the basic goal that I was pursuing was to make it to look like a bunch of hair, but at the same time, as this is a stylized project, there shouldn't be really too many details. So I made up the following pipeline. Hopefully you would love it. So first off, you start with a cylinder. Let's append here the cylinder. Maybe it's a good idea to start working on it in another tool, but I wouldn't bother. So once again we want to go to transform tool, and there is a very useful modifier, taper. We want taper the upper part, well, just completely, and the lower part just a little bit, like that, and accept it. Then you want to copy it and paste many times. So you can do just several, but then if you need more, you just remember that the last one should stay if you need more copies. But let's start from the first one. There is another very useful transform modifier, which is bend curve. I love it. First off, you should orientate it in the correct way. Now it's from the left to the right, so I need to change it, change the axis. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And curve resolution would make more dots if I increase it, There are a lot of them, right? But you don't want to have too much, because then you would lose control over them. Let's say 5 is good. You simply start changing the geometry, something like that. In this case, you see I little by little lose control over this zone. So in this case, you want to add resolution and start working with new dots, but it should be done step by step. That is very important. Also, this modifier enables you to twist like this, which we don't want right now, and scale it or squeeze. Well, squeezing is something, well, it makes it, you know, thinner. So maybe we want to scale it here a little bit, there, make it, squeeze it a little bit. So the first one, let's say we like it and we accept it. So we simply go to the next one and repeat this process once again. Bend curve, resolution like 5, but this time we want it to be just a little bit in different dimension, maybe something like that. That could take a while, I wouldn't lie. Let's increase the resolution. That's why helmet could become a little bit messing with the view. So you already see the idea. You keep doing this one by one and end up with a very nice base shape for the tail. Maybe I will now take a pause and just finish it to show you the ending result. But the idea is that in the end you simply merge all of them down and dynamesh it so that it becomes one object. But it could take a while, so let me just do it off camera. So I've done the preparation. Last time it took me like maybe several hours. Now I did it for several minutes, so it could be not perfect. The more these cylinders you have, the better result would be. So after you finish bending it, you want to merge it down. You go to in subtool, you go to the merge down. So the merge down would merge the chosen subtool with the one which is lower in this list. So after you've merged it down, it's one subtool. Now you can dynamesh it. You go to the geometry and let's dynamesh. Yeah, this resolution, let's say, is just fine. So now it's not a number of cylinders together, it's just one object. You can see that there are these seams. So after that you might want to polish it simply and maybe go and for the first time in this project smooth it, as this is an organic object, smooth, and some imperfection is only welcome. So I didn't do too many of the cylinders, so there are not too many of the information. And the last one, to make it just a little bit more interesting, is the clay polish tool. You can try to do it with several settings. Just remember that clay polish would leave a mask after it, and you would have to clear it. So after clay polish you might want to smooth it out once again. So of course the more time you invest, the better the result. So I would show you my tail that I ended up with, something like that. It's just the same pipeline. So we can now simply move it over here. Maybe we would want to extend this part a little bit. Maybe something like that. Smooth it out. Once again, rotate it. Well, this is completely up to you how to tackle this problem, so you just need to squeeze it just a bit. There are multiple ways to do this. And let's say we put it over here. Something like that. So, of course, as I said, there could be a lot of tweakings. For example, you might want to lower that part down. It really should follow your base body mesh. But here is the result. Here is my pipeline of hard surface modeling in Zbrush. I hope you liked it. I hope you can find some use in your future projects. Good luck with them.